Hi, I'm Larry Richardson, your step-by-step chef. In this episode, we're going to make one of my favorite spicy soups, Tom Yum. This Thai soup is very hot. It's very spicy. It's also sweet. It's also salty. It pretty much touches all the bases, and it's really good when I don't feel all that good. So it is a soup that I do fall back on, especially if I'm having any problems with my sinuses. And you're going to see why in a minute. So come on, let's cook. Okay, so here are the ingredients for our Tom Yum. The first thing we need is a 32-ounce box of chicken broth. Now, I do have a recipe on stepbystepchef.com that will show you how to home make chicken broth, and I do actually recommend it if you have that kind of time because it's quite delicious. So take a look at Step by Step Chef if you want to make it fresh and make your own chicken broth. Just make sure that you do make 32 ounces worth. The next up we have fish sauce. Now we're going to start with 3 tablespoons of fish sauce to flavor the broth, and then you can decide after you taste the broth if you want to add 1 more tablespoon. It is pretty tasty, but it's also pretty potent, so you don't want to go to town with it right from the start. The next thing we have is our lemongrass. Now this is powdered lemongrass. You can get that in Asian markets, online, or at major retailers. For the lemongrass, we're going to use half a teaspoon. And now we have our Tom Yum paste. Now the paste is also pretty potent, and what I recommend is that you start out with about 6 tablespoons of Tom Yum paste, and then again taste the broth, and if you think it needs a little bit more, feel free to add it. I'm also going to use some extra firm tofu, which we're going to cube, and that adds a delicious healthy protein to this Tom Yum. We also have shrimp. I have 10 jumbo shrimp with the tails on that we'll add to the soup. Now that adds just a really good flavor to it, and even eating the shrimp individually is quite tasty. So that's totally up to you. If you don't like shrimp, you don't have to add it. You could even add a little bit of chicken if you wanted to too. So it's totally up to you. We're going to use some cilantro. This is a very small bunch of cilantro that we'll add at the end when the soup is just about finished. We have about 3/4 of a cup of white mushrooms. Now with the mushrooms, ideally you can get your hands on some straw mushrooms because they taste really good in this dish. And if you can get those fresh, fantastic. If the best you can do is to get a can, that's fine too. But these white mushrooms taste really good in it too. I have 2 celery stalks that we're going to slice into very small pieces. I have 4 tomatoes, and this will be the last thing that we add to the soup so it doesn't fall apart. And we're going to use half a lime, which we're going to squeeze into the soup. So that's pretty much it. That's what we're going to use in our tasty Tom Yum. And now let me show you how to put it all together. Okay, so what we want to do to get started is just pour all of the liquid ingredients into our soup pan. And that way we can start warming this up as we slice up the other ingredients. So there is our 32-ounce box of chicken broth. Here comes our half teaspoon of lemongrass. Okay. And if you can't get this lemongrass, use a whole lime, squeeze a whole lime. I'm only going to squeeze half a lime into this because I was able to get the lemongrass powder. Now we'll add our 6 tablespoons of Tom Yum paste. And be certain to check the label of the kind of, or the brand of Tom Yum paste that you get, because they do come in different concentrates, and you want to make sure that you don't overdo it for the brand that you're able to get your hands on. And it should tell you exactly how much you need for this kind of recipe. Okay, and there's the 6th one. And we'll just kind of rinse that off into the broth. I don't want to waste any of this valuable paste. And now I'm going to squeeze half my lime into it. I could tell you this already smells really delicious. What a great aroma. You just have so many things going on with this. And now what I'm going to do is just take a spoon, mix this up, and put it over medium heat to get it started to warming. Okay, so while the soup warms up, again it's on medium heat, I'm going to take these 2 celery stalks and just give them a nice slice. And these are about 1/8 of an inch thick slices. You don't want to go too thin, it can be hardy. But everything should be bite-sized, so if you have really thick celery stalks, make sure to split them in half and then cut them. And make sure to do it in this order too, because the celery and the mushrooms need to cook first. The tomatoes are very delicate and they're going to be added just about last in the order of making this tom yum soup. Now if you're using canned straw mushrooms or canned white mushrooms, you can add them right now. You can just pour them right into the broth. So I'm just giving these a slice, and the pieces, again, they're about 1/8 of an inch thick, maybe just slightly thicker, but these will cook down in the broth. So I will throw these right into our broth, which is simmering over on the stove. Now for the tofu, I'm going to use 1/3 of it. There we go, because I'm having shrimp with this. If I were just using the tofu, I would use 1/2 to 3/4 of it. But since we're using shrimp as a protein also, I don't need that much of the tofu. And you're also welcome to leave the tofu out altogether if you don't like it. I just think it's a very healthy protein to have in this soup. And it gives it yet another kind of neat texture. So I do recommend it, but if you don't like it, don't use it. And again, this is extra firm tofu, and I'm just cutting it into cubes. And because it's extra firm, it slices very easily. So you can see, those are just these very tiny cubes of tofu, which I'm also just going to add right into the broth right now. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is slice our tomatoes. These are Campari tomatoes. If you can't get your hands on Campari or any of these smaller sized tomatoes, then you can certainly use a full-size tomato. The secret is to cut it into bite-sized pieces. So you can see I took this Campari tomato and I'm just cutting it into these little 1/3 pieces. So this is bite-sized. So whatever tomatoes you have in season right now that you can get your hands on, just cut it into bite-sized pieces and it will be just fine. I really love these Campari tomatoes because they're very sweet and they have a nice texture too. I think you could do the exact same thing with cherry tomatoes too. And you don't have to clean out the seeds or the core because they actually add flavor to the soup. And the last thing we'll chop up, basically mince, is our cilantro. And we're just going to put that in with the tomato because they're going to be added at the end. And the cilantro really does add a delicious taste to the soup. If you can't get cilantro where you are this time of year, that's fine. I mean, it does add some flavor to it, but it's not critical. I've certainly had the soup many times without cilantro, but if you can get fresh cilantro, do it. It's worth it. So yet another exotic taste that is added to your tom yum. Now the reason I'm picking the leaves off at this point is that the stalks got kind of stemmy, and I don't want a bunch of stems in our tom yum. So that should be enough of the cilantro. Okay, and now I'll meet you over at the stove. Okay, so you can see that the soup has a good simmer going. The mushrooms are cooking down, the celery's cooking down too. So what I'm going to do is just cover the pan and let it simmer for 5 minutes. That'll give the mushrooms and the celery a chance to get a little bit softer, and then we'll add the other ingredients. So I'll be right back. And 5 minutes later, here we are. Everything's simmering quite nicely. So the next thing I'm going to do is add the shrimp. Now the shrimp is going to take 5 minutes to cook at this level of simmer. If it stops simmering completely, if your soup stops simmering completely, then turn the heat back up a little bit, around medium, a little bit higher, cover the pan, and let it simmer for those 5 minutes. So again, I'll be back again. Okay, so here we are 5 minutes later. The shrimp are all cooked. You can see the mushrooms are cooking down nicely. The celery's all mixed in there. The tofu looks great. So all we're going to do at this point is add our tomatoes and cilantro. And at this point, turn the heat off. You don't need any more, and you really don't want to cook these tomatoes down. And the celery should stay pretty fresh too. So let's turn the heat off and give it a taste. Ah, that came out just right. Now, this is a spicy hot soup. So even though we didn't add any kind of hot peppers to it, the tom yum paste itself has a lot of heat in it. So I'm just telling you, this is exactly what you want. This is delicious tom yum with shrimp and tofu, and I think you will really enjoy this. So congratulations, look at what you just did. You just made this delicious tom yum, and the aromas, oh, it is so rich. You can see your shrimp, you got your celery, you have your tomatoes, the tofu, you have the cilantro, and that broth is absolutely to die for. Now again, this is one that I will make a pot of and live off of this with some rice for an entire weekend. And it is absolutely great for clearing my sinuses. It also makes a great side with Thai food or just about any other dish that you can imagine. Do it by your taste. Now if you like this dish, please visit my website stepbystepchef.com. There you're going to find dozens of step-by-step recipes and videos for delicious meals just like this. So I am Larry Richardson, I am your step-by-step chef, and I'll see you in the next episode.